Hey there, I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Sports fandom has always been a dominant force. Some would even argue that it is one of the most powerful forms of community building, in that it, like no other endeavor, can gather people of varying race, creed, and socioeconomic status to band together and get behind a united cause. Now, detractors, or those who might try to minimize the significance of it all, might point out that these group rallying cries are kind of built on mounds of triviality, namely outcomes of games that are inconsequential when considering macro takes on life and living. However, our guest today is someone I'd suspect would take major issue with the downplaying of fandom. After hearing him speak and listening to his story, I'd surmise that you may too. All right, welcome to the show. So, Reid is a Buffalo, New York based entrepreneur, nonprofit founder, community builder extraordinaire, and superfan. Yeah, you heard that right, superfan. His company, 26 Shirts, is an enterprise based around selling limited edition Buffalo, New York themed t shirts. And here's the cool part: for every shirt sold, a donation is made to a specified family in need or charitable organization. The donations are most often directed towards charitable organizations that support mental health and medical concerns or unexpected family emergencies for those in the community. And Dell has always had a passion for bringing people together to celebrate things that they share in common. Ironically, that is exactly what he has been doing on scale with his passionate following of an NFL football club, the Buffalo Bills. Reid and his efforts have resulted in him and his company helping to inspire Buffalo, New York residents to raise and donate nearly 1.5 million. Yeah, that's right, 1.5 million dollars towards charitable organizations. And to add to the story, and quite possibly the second coolest thing, is that Dell has also serendipitously established himself as a pseudo fan godfather of this rabid NFL fan base. And get this, he was the one that launched the now unifying label for Bills fans from around the world, Bills Mafia. This moniker has now come to represent much more than just fandom. Rather, it refers to a group of people who, yes, tirelessly support the team, can be a bit crazy, might have jumped through a table or two, but also support each other and their community, and even communities in other cities. Their social hashtag, Bills Mafia, has become just as much a rallying cry for their team as it has been for flash mob like social donations amounting to hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars donated to utterly worthy charitable causes. So, in noting all the above, Dell, I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Yeah, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. Doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. Really excited to get into all of this. And yeah, why don't we? I'm conscious of your time. I do have the first segment lined up here. It's something called Coloring Wikipedia. And basically, here I just read off a definition of the guest profession. Do it for a couple of reasons. One, kind of brings everybody up to speed on what it is that guest does. And then two, it's kind of a nice launching pad into the whole discussion. Sometimes Wikipedia is on, sometimes it's off, and it just allows us to explore the profession itself. So yeah, I have you down here for social entrepreneurship, and so I could just read that off, and from there, get your thoughts. Does that sound all right?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Here we go. Social entrepreneurship. So, social entrepreneurship is an approach by individuals, groups, startup companies, or entrepreneurs in which they develop, fund, and implement solutions to social, cultural, or environmental issues. This concept may be applied to a wide range of organizations, which vary in size, aim, and beliefs. For profit entrepreneurs, typically measure performance using business metrics like profit, revenues, and increases in stock prices. Social entrepreneurs, however, are either nonprofits or they blend for profit goals with generating a positive return to society. Therefore, they use different metrics. Social entrepreneurship typically attempts to further broad social, cultural, and environmental goals, often associated with the voluntary sector in areas such as poverty alleviation, healthcare, and community development. A bit of a mouthful. What do you think about that?
um, I think it's pretty spot on. There's a lot of, I mean, as a social entrepreneur, right? They're still used, with having a for-profit business that is socially minded. You still have to be careful in terms of like your profit and your margins and stuff like that. But built into those margins, in our case, is the giving component. But so there's a lot of, still got to be a grown up about it. Still got to crunch the numbers correctly. But I think that's well done, Wikipedia. Well done.
They don't often get a pass, I'll tell you that. I mean, doing this for a little while now. So yeah, it's hit or miss, really, to be honest. I'd imagine though, too, of course, you have the P&L statements, and yeah, you're a business. You got to keep things running. You have your own life to take care of, and probably employees as well. But outside of that too, I found what was interesting in that definition, like some of the other maybe metrics that you'd be looking at, and maybe within your model itself, you have notions of how, these targets, like you want to raise so much money for maybe this charity or that charity. Is that how it sort of works within your operation? Or maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, with our operation, we tend to rotate it every week with a new family, a specific family that we're helping. And then there are a couple longstanding charitable organizations that we support, month after month, year after year. But yeah, so we're always trying to keep in touch with what's going on in the community and how we can help.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah. I mean, in terms of your operation, there's so many unique elements to it all. What you do and what you just explained there. I guess like the release of these shirts that come out, and then part of the proceeds go to some of these charities. In your mind, or at least, what do you think? What makes 26 shirts, 26 shirts? What makes it so unique as compared to other enterprises out there?
We put our causes first and foremost. Like, it's there's a lot going on. Because we're so similar to so many businesses that are out there, but at the same time we're so different.
Yeah.
Every business consultant that I've worked with over the years, except for the most recent one, and that's also probably because I told them in our first meeting, like, don't say this, but every business consultant that I've worked with has told us that we give too much. That that we have to be maximizing our profits and blah 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 and all that kind of grown up business mumbo jumbo. But really, we exist to help. And my original thought for this, what was going to be like a 1-year community service project, was to run it under a nonprofit umbrella. But the lawyer I had at the time, and I've had some lawyers in years past now, have like corroborated this opinion, and I've had others say, "Nah, you didn't really have to." But my lawyer, the advice I had at the time was to not to do this under a nonprofit umbrella, because when you're dealing with this much merchandise, it's going to be difficult to in terms of taxes and stuff like that, because like really you're mimicking a retail business, and if you're doing that, it'll be hairy with the state, right? So technically we are a for-profit business, but our goals are to give as much as possible. I want to I'm not trying to drive a nicer car, live in a bigger house, go on vacations around the world or anything like that. Really, I just want to help the causes that we've identified as much as possible. My employees here, I want to compensate them as fairly as possible, if not more than that. I want this to be somewhere where everybody leaves on Friday afternoon feeling refreshed, not exhausted. So we really put people first, and that's such a pie in the sky corporate thing to say, but we really do put people first. We want to help the causes, and the people that are in this business with me, I want to support them as much as possible as well.
Yeah. From the outside looking in, I'm guessing that's been part of, a major reason for much of your success. I'd be curious to hear what you think about that as well. I mean, like you said, it's one thing to say it, but it's another to actually do it. And not only those within your company, but I think within the community at large, Western New York community recognizes this as well, perhaps. What would you say to that?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, this is not a gimmick for us. Like, we're not trying to support families. We're not trying to give just so that people buy the shirts. The shirts are the means to the end. And I always joke that, if I could sell hammers to help families, I'd sell hammers. Just t-shirts are more engaging and more fun. And it's, only so many different kinds of hammers you can sell, right? But yeah, I think anybody who has followed us, closely, or maybe even from afar, they can see that we're authentic. I'm authentic in
Yeah.
terms of what I'm trying to accomplish with this business. I'm not trying, like I said, I'm not trying to build an empire. I'm just trying to. The only way I know how to help people is with coming up with corny T-shirt designs, and sometimes it works, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to be authentic. The giving isn't a gimmick. It's not a means to an end. The giving is the end for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what I want to kind of draw out here is just that. Because I think, again, I think that's what everybody picks up on. And I think that's what a big part of what fuels your success, again, from an outsider's perspective. Sort of segueing into the t-shirts themselves, for listeners who don't know, the shirts themselves are themed, and oftentimes they're tied into what's going on, the mood, the sentiment, events that are taking place within the community. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit really quickly as well.
Yeah, so I've always been a big T-shirt nerd ever since I was a little kid. All I ever wanted to wear was, as my mom called them, novelty tees. So that's always been my interest. For years, there's these daily T-shirt websites like Woot. Another one is called Ripped Apparel, and I always enjoy going there, like every day, hoping I don't like what is actually
Right.
on the website. Because if I like it, I'm gonna have to buy it, right? And
Yeah.
explain to my wife why I have the 1700th shirt that's been delivered this month. But that's always been like a passion of mine. So the idea that we were able to marry that with something that with our fandom for our football team, meaning Buffalo, the love that we have for the football team, the hockey team, the region in general, just ways to celebrate that in a way that gives back to that same community is something that has been kind of
important to
the push behind all of this. Yeah, for sure. And it's important to me. The way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I would kind of like to segue into a new segment here, a Q&A discovery. We can just kind of continue this back and forth. And in this line of conversation we have right now, maybe we could dive into your past a little bit. I understand that before you started 26 Shirts, you were in actually IT for a while. Now, at some point, of course, this notion of altruism and then also your fandom collided and in essence sort of gave birth to what we have now in 26 Shirts. But maybe you could share a bit of that backstory and how things came to be.
Yeah. So I worked at Roswell Park, which is a cancer hospital here in Buffalo, the nation's first cancer hospital, designated comprehensive cancer center in the United States. I worked there for almost 14 and a half years before beginning to do this full time. But I always, this will probably work into my words of wisdom later on today when we talk about that. But the words of wisdom segment, I should say, for anybody who's listening for the first time. I'm not just saying, hey, I'm going to drop you some words of wisdom. So for first time listeners, right? But no, but I've always been, like I said, I've always really been into the whole T-shirt thing, like I was saying before, and I've always had like this affinity for screens. I guess is the best way to put it. Since I was a little kid, I think I was in second grade or third grade. My parents bought a Texas Instruments computer. I fell in love with that, using basic programming, learning that as as the months went by since Christmas and everything, and just really falling in love with computers in general, at least for a time, right? And then the passion kind of left for me, but I was always good at it, so I could always make it work, right? And so I figured, because it was, even though now years down the path, even though I wasn't quite as passionate for computers as I was, I felt like, well, this is what I'm good at, so this must be what I'm supposed to do for me. And that was I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. That was a learning experience for me. It's just because you're equipped to do something doesn't mean you have to be doing it for your life. It's about, what are you passionate about? I've always been passionate about helping people, however I can. A lot of it comes from my faith. As a believer, I feel like who much is given, much is expected. That kind of thing. So. When getting back to the screens, always kind of into screens or whatever. So when smartphones arrived and always been a passionate Bills fan. Grew up in Western New York. Anybody who grew up around here understands, like, you're a Bills fan. If you're born here, you're a Bills fan. It's a DNA thing. It's in the water. You drink it, you're a Bills fan.
Yeah.
And so I discovered Twitter in 2008. Back then, it was almost all just tech guys. At least my experience is all I could find with people talking about, like, the latest version of Windows, or talking about Linux or web development or something. And it wasn't until about a year after I discovered it that actually, like, NFL type discussions started happening on there. And I was kind of like, finally, this is what I've been waiting for, somebody to talk to about how terrible the Bills are. Because back then they were pretty bad, right? I need people I can commiserate with, right? Outside of just the dudes I work with every day. So anyways, so that happened, and immediately I fell in love with just social media in general, being able to share just ideas and passions with people you don't even know, but you share that with them. The joke was always made back in the day that Facebook's where you go, basically, is all the, how is it said? On Facebook, it's all the people that you know in real life and can't stand, and Twitter was all the people you've never met but love, because it wasn't focused on, and that's not fair to anybody who's friends with me on Facebook. Don't take it personal, just but no, but it's always, because Facebook has always been a representation of your real life relationships, and Twitter was always a representation of people you share interests with around the world. And so as that kind of grew with Bills fandom and being able to talk to other fans and everything, it's just kind of like all, what's the word I'm looking for, steamrolled for this for me. So totally lost my train of thought now. Sorry about that, but that's always kind of how it's been. Like, I just realized that there was a way to marry my passion with what I was good at, and what I was good at didn't have to masquerade as my passion, if that makes sense.
So totally. Okay. All right. So this might be a nice point as well to kind of segue into the other half of this conversation, which is, this labeling of Bills Mafia. Like I said off the top, pretty cool story there. No doubt. I mean, maybe you could share a little bit more about that. I'm sure you're kind of on that track anyway, or you just were. So how did Bills Mafia come about, by the way?
So I'll do my best to keep the story short, because it can get pretty long and involved if I choose to go down. Instead of going over every single detail, right? But so in 2010, Stevie Johnson dropped a pass against the Pittsburgh Steelers in overtime. The team had started 0-8 that year, ended up finishing 4-4, but people were still just as passionate for the team at 0-8 as they were at 0-0 in week one, because that's just how that's how it is
Western New Yorkers roll.
Exactly. So they're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, a perennial playoff team. It seems ironic saying that, because we're recording this just after the Bills beat the Steelers by like 35 points. So that was not something that was a regular happening back in 2010. Stevie Johnson drops the pass in overtime, goes on Twitter that night, and basically, I don't know if he blamed God, but he questioned God in his tweet. And Twitter was so new back then; it felt like everything that was happening for the first time. So, you've got a prominent professional athlete who is basically questioning his faith publicly on social media. Ended up making the rounds around the news that evening and talk shows the next day. Bills fans, as they are known to do, kind of rally around him, especially since he just scored 3 touchdowns the week prior against the Cincinnati Bengals in a comeback win. And basically telling him to keep his head up and, stay strong, all that stuff. And then you go fast forward to the next day, and Adam Schefter retweets it. And for anybody that follows the NFL, they know that all information comes through Adam Schefter. Like, most of the time when you're hearing something for the first time, it's either through him, Chris Morton, the breaking news, or him, Chris Mortensen, maybe one or two other, but he is like the main information dispenser when it comes to NFL fandom, right? So the fact that he was retweeting this like a day later, which in Twitter time is like 2 weeks later, it felt kind of like he was kind of like rubbing our nose in it, and just Bills fans being oversensitive. I'll be totally honest. He was totally oversensitive, and basically we started making fun of Adam Schefter for sharing something that we had been, basically living through the past 18 hours. And one of my Bills Mafia co-founders, as it would turn out to be, Breon made a hashtag called Schefter Breaking News, and we were all using that hashtag and trying to outdo each other with funny things that happened in the past.
Right.
And it was like President Kennedy shot hashtag Schefter Breaking News,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Poking
Ends
fun.
up going, man discovers fire hashtag Schefter Breaking News,
Yeah.
and um, and so Adam Schefter apparently didn't find it as funny as we all did. And I always tell people too, I promise we weren't being nasty. Like Twitter now there's a lot of vitriol and people are so nasty with each other.
It was
It wasn't
different
like
earlier
that.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was like a softer, kinder, gentler Twitter, right? But but like I say, for as far as I can tell, nobody was super nasty with him. Nobody's swearing, calling him names. He ends up blocking a bunch of us, and it just felt like a gross
You've done
overreaction.
something.
Right? Yeah. To my knowledge, it was the first time I was ever blocked by somebody.
Yeah.
But so it was just us like a tongue in cheek reference. I said a few months later I called us the Bills Mafia,
Yeah.
basically referencing those of us that had been blocked, and it was a one off tweet that I thought was going to be like just tweet it and forget it, right? And it just for the months that followed just continued to gain steam and become more and more popular and well known among Bills fans. And then the players started using it, and Stevie Johnson himself started using it, which is kind of full circle, right? And it just it just grew and grew. It blew up, and people knew who started it. And because back then Twitter was so small, I felt like I knew every Bills fan that was on Twitter. Now forget it. But it grew to the point where we realized this was something that we could probably do something with, And so Breon reached out to me and said, should we do something here? And, you'll find this is a common theme. My thought was, I don't know, maybe we can make t-shirts.
Yeah.
And so I said, what if we took the Twitter bird and we put a red slash on it? And because it was all, at that time, Bills Mafia was just a subset of Bills fans on Twitter. That was it. Mm-hmm. And I said, we could put it on a shirt and, whatever. Maybe people have fun with that. And we decided early on, whatever money we made from those shirts, we would give to charity. We were all gainfully employed. None of us were trying to, do any. Not where we weren't trying to capitalize on it. We were just having fun with it. Like, holy cow, Bills players and Bills fans are enjoying this funny term that grew out of something we did on Twitter, and let's just enjoy this and ride it.
Right.
And it grew and grew and grew to now you fast forward 10, 11 years and now it's the name of the fan base, and every NFL pundit knows that Bills fans are Bills Mafia, and most Bills fans accept that moniker and celebrate it. And so much has happened.
A lot of different things, for the fandom and for a lot of the other things outside of the, off the field as well, which maybe we can kind of get into right now. Really kind of cool stuff too. Again, I think it's this group rallying cry that brings people together. And there's two stories in particular that really stand out to me in following this club as well for a number of years. And one was when, we went through this stretch where we weren't getting in the playoffs for a number of years, 17, in fact. And then finally they were gloriously ended. And afterwards, there was something amazing that transpired there. And this Bills Mafia thing ties into it all. And the second thing here that maybe you could share is that the Stars grandmother, the star quarterback's grandmother, had passed away. And again, Bills fans rallied around the sense of community and a lot of outpouring and this notion of Bills Mafia. And again, did something just amazing. I was hoping that maybe you could kind of fill listeners in on both of those stories, just brief sort of overviews, if you will.
Yeah, and those are just really two examples of
those
so many
two
of these. Yeah, just so many of these donation drives that have happened as a result of something happening on the football field and affect something in the real world. So so the first one that you alluded to was Andy Dalton's touchdown pass that he threw to Tyler Boyd to beat the Ravens in it was in overtime. It was at the very end of the game, very dramatic fashion. The Bills had to win. They had to beat Miami, and then they had to have the Bengals beat the Ravens in order to get that final playoff spot and break the drought, which became one of the defining elements of the team in general. It's just this. I don't know if it was an NFL record drought, but it sure felt like it. I
Felt like it
remember,
didn't. Yeah.
yeah, for years. I remember Howard Simon on local radio saying, "Oh, they're about to hit double digits. It's going to be 10 years," and then next thing you know, it's 17 years.
Yeah, it was becoming a
And
sad
so
part of the identity of the
it
whole thing, wasn't it? Oh, I
it
know.
really was, yeah, it really
Yeah.
was becoming part of the identity. And so that whole, Andy Dalton throws that touchdown pass. Suddenly, the Bills are going to the playoffs thanks to a fourth and 12 or whatever, like the crazy odds touchdown, right? That happened, and uh, a Bills fan in Grand Island, Nebraska, not New York, Grand Island, Nebraska. Kevin ends up coming up with this idea. Like, I just donated $17 to Andy Dalton's foundation. I'm encouraging other Bills fans to do that as well. And people started retweeting it, and then I saw it and did the same and retweeted it. $17 for the 17 years of the drought, and it took off and ended up raising like almost like $500,000 or over $500,000 or something ridiculous. And it's pretty cool. I had the opportunity later that year to actually meet Kevin and everything, and him and his family are great people. And it was really cool, And that was kind of the first real donation drive that happened with something happening on the field that I
On
recall.
scale,
Maybe there's
no
something before
less.
that. Yeah. And it just absolutely exploded. And since then, there's been so many times where something happens. And I'll touch on the Josh Allen one in a moment, like you mentioned. But like just recently, Micah Hyde, Bill's star safety, turns out he was injured. He's out for the year. Bills fans all donated $23 to his nonprofit, Imagine for Youth. There was another time Lamar Jackson got injured against the Bills in a playoff game, and Bills fans, even though he didn't even play for the Bills, it wasn't something that affect. I mean, I guess him going out certainly did affect the Bills. They ended up winning that game, but just to show support, because we're like, players are players. It's a fraternity,
Humans are humans.
And to support him, he went to Louisville for college, and there was a charity there, backpack, stuff backpacks and everything for kids. They did a huge donation drive for them in Lamar Jackson's honor. There's a women and children's shelter in Tennessee when Bills fans got pissed off because Tennessee Titans fans employed bots to fix a best fans poll in the offseason by Fox Sports.
Right.
It's silly, right? So many of these. There's more I could mention, but the second one that you mentioned there was in the 2020 season, Josh Allen, the Bills beat the Seattle Seahawks. Turns out fans found out after the game that Josh Allen's grandmother had just passed away, and started donating $17 each. This time, not for the playoff drought, but for his jersey number. And I always thought it was kind of ironic that next quote unquote Jim Kelly is wearing 17. It's kind of, even though he's not the one that broke the drought, it's just kind of funny how that number keeps playing into Bills history. But $17 per donation was going to the Oshai Children's Hospital, which was basically the charity of choice of Josh Allen that he's chosen to support in his time here in Buffalo. And over $1 million was raised, and so much other stuff has happened since then, born out of that effort by Bills fans. I mean, Bills fans, we love the team, and we cheer them on, and we're sad when they lose, and it affects our lives, our emotional state of being. But it's really it's so much more. The Bills' performance on the field, the Bills themselves, it's so much more than just their standings that week in the NFL or how many championships they're able to win. So far, 0. Hopefully 1 at the end of this year. But just all that on-field performance, they are more than that. They're the community. They have a buffalo on the side of their helmet. The city, every other business you see here in Buffalo has a buffalo as their corporate logo. It seems like just because that's how we identify ourselves. And so we support stuff that happens with the Bills, and then the Sabres as well. Stuff happens. Our love for our community is expressed in our fandom for those teams, is expressed in our love for the community. There's no beginning and end when it comes to
really.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's no beginning, there's no end when it comes to our love for the teams and our love for our community. You meet somebody from Buffalo, chances are they're probably born in Buffalo. It's not a huge transplant city. It's not like DC, Charlotte,
Right.
places in Texas.
Yeah.
People that live here have lived here. Their families have lived here. We have a lot of
Yeah.
community. We have a lot of civic pride.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what's really beginning to shine. And I think like the rest of the country and even outside of the country as well, people are starting to recognize that through a lot of these endeavors and what's been taking shape, that has really truly become the identity of that region, I would say. And it's what makes it special, I suppose, is just that, and I kind of referenced
Mhm.
this off the top where, following a team or getting into sports that deeply and having it affect your day, some people might say, well, this is ridiculous. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. Well, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't see it that way, And just off the conversation we just had, and what you're just speaking about right there, kind of evidences it right there in terms of the value that it can really bring. Outside of just these games, there's all this other ancillary sort of things that are taking place or taking shape and affecting people's lives in a positive manner. So, yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. And I might be going off on a limb here, but I think part of this too, like it's timing, certainly a timing issue as well. But like this labeling of Bills Mafia at that time when it came about, maybe it was just like this perfect storm. But I think it became this sort of like rallying sort of cry, and it brought this group together. It was always the community was already there, but I think this helped
Mhm.
solidify it. And I think you played a big part in a lot of that. I'm not saying that any of these things wouldn't have happened without this labeling, but I think it's been amplified by it. Perhaps, curious to hear what you might think of that.
Yeah, the community's always been there, right? And I always
Yeah.
say if it wasn't Bills Mafia, it was going to be something else, some
Right.
banner that Bills fans were going to um, rally under because it's not new. Like this love for our team, it's not new.
Right. Right.
I'm not the first generation. My kids aren't the second generation, whatever, to
Yeah.
have this. It's something
Yeah.
that's passed down generation to generation. To be honest with you, it is kind of crazy and weird, and it's an honor to be a footnote, maybe in the Buffalo Bills history, just in terms of like with the creation of Bills Mafia and
Yeah.
with Bree and Leslie and everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's there's a lot of pride, and there's something to be said that this basically happened after a 4-12 season.
Yeah.
There's no. It wasn't like a bunch of bandwagoners like, oh, what are we going to call ourselves with this team that's fantastic, and we're all attaching ourselves to it. No, we're here. It used to be a joke that like the Bills were a sentence. You're born in Buffalo, and your sentence is that you're a fan of the
Right.
Bills because they had such a long stretch of you know ineptitude, right? But like,
Futility.
but
Yeah.
really, it's a blessing, to be able to root for this team, even when they're not doing well. Even it's because of everything I touched on before.
Yeah.
The community is such a big part of Western New York, and Buffalo is called the city of good neighbors for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, and I have all these different Bills fans that I've met over the past 10 or 11 years through Bills Mafia, and we probably disagree on a bunch of different things politically and just the different faiths, different ethnicities, different socioeconomic background, like everything you can think of, every kind of representation of a person and what they believe in, what they think is there as a Bills fan, right? And some
Yeah.
people I probably have nothing in common with, except for we love the Buffalo Bills. And that love that we have is expressed into the community now through these different efforts to help the community, help people in the community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm
And the
I'm
cool.
super proud of. I'm sorry. I was just say I was
No,
super
no, no.
proud
Go
of.
ahead.
No, I'm very proud to have to be a part of that. Not as somebody who started Bills Mafia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
said, this fandom was here. This giving spirit has always been here. I'm just proud to be a part of it. That's it.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And the coolest thing too is it's extended out, as you said earlier in the conversation. It's not just within Western New York. I mean, this sort of moniker, it applies now across the nation, and it even applies outside of the country as well. Fans abroad have adopted this as well. Hell, I mean, I'm based in Japan. I've been a fan for years and years. I've gone through the droughts. I've done all of it. I'm going to break this out right now. There it is. There
Nice.
it is. We're over in Japan. It's represented all the way over here, So, hey, like,
Yep.
yeah, but over in the UK and
Good
elsewhere
stuff.
too. I mean, it's something,
Mm-hmm.
right? But on the other hand, now part of the story here, I know hasn't always been, lollipops and gumdrops in terms of this relationship with the Bills. In fact, I do know that at one point, once this Bills Mafia thing started taking off, you have this multi-billion-dollar corporation in essence that is seeing this, and like any organization of that size, they want control. They want control of their brand, their image, all of this stuff. And there was a time there where it was getting a little bit hairy, maybe ruffling of a few feathers within the Bills organization, that this Bills Mafia thing is taking off. They didn't own it. Maybe you could share a little bit about what was going on there and how things did resolve themselves in the end.
Yeah, so the early days, different, somebody else owned the team. Different people were running the team at that time. They weren't, and I get it, like, especially when this was like we were just like a niche group of fans within a larger niche group of fans that were on Twitter, right? So, but it didn't seem like they were too crazy about the term, and I get it. I understand that some people have, don't have glowing reviews of the term Bills Mafia, but it wasn't something that it was organic. We weren't trying to create something. We weren't trying to start a new brand. We weren't none of that. It was just a joke. It took off. People thought it was funny. We rallied behind it, and it became an identity. But in the early days, under previous administrations and stuff like that, they would, a player would tweet something with Bills Mafia, and they would actually like retweet it manually and take out the word Mafia and say Bills fans and stuff. Yeah. So it wasn't something that, was always like warmly received by the administration. Like I said, when the Pagulas took over, it seemed like they were much more in tune with the fan base, and as the fan base, or I'm sorry, as the term grew among the fan base, they're accepting of it, and now they've themselves adopted the term, and they understand. I've always said mafia means family. We weren't out trying to put hits on people. It was, always kind of played into that aspect. We're not. I mean, look what Bills fans have done over the past 10 years in terms of raising the money and everything. We're not jerks, But So I would say that the previous ownership, the leadership at that time wasn't really interested in it. They thought it was cool that people were engaged with their love for the team, and they're expressing it in some way. But it's never really been like contentious with them or anything like that. When they, in 2020, when they decided that they were going to officially adopt the term, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is what we're thinking of doing and everything," and they involved me. And I made as many times as I met with them, I made a point of stressing it's about community, it's about family. These are the things that it's not a, we didn't create the term to become some marketing buzz thing. We weren't trying to, like I said, offend people. We weren't trying to exploit people through. And they understood. Like I, had the opportunity to, meet with Kim Pagula briefly in one of those meetings, and she said, "I totally get it. I understand. It's family, and that's something that we believe in, and that's something that we try to push. We try to not even push, but like we try to incorporate. We're family." And I think they were using at the time like one family or something, like was kind of like their terminology they were using. So they've always understood that, from the jump. They've been accepting and the Pagulas. And I, like I said, I even have a contention with Ralph Wilson's administration or wherever that, just trying to explain the timeline. But they've always, the Pagulas, even with the Sabres, they've shown they want to be engaged with the fans and what the fans are thinking, and they've really had that mindset. So so I guess that's my story. You know what I mean? It's been anything but contentious, and they've been, the past couple of years especially, they've been gracious on a lot of fronts with all of this. Now they're going to take it directions they want to take it, and who am I, to say this is how you need to represent your team?
Hold on a second.
Exactly.
I didn't sign off on this one. Wait a minute.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I understand how that all works. And like I said earlier, like, not for nothing, but like it's kind of cool to be a footnote on Wikipedia, like in the write up on Wikipedia, touching on that from earlier, like our names are on there. It's kind of cool, right? Like we've played a part in the history of the Buffalo Bills. It's cool.
And as a fan of the club, I mean, nothing cooler than that. And to add to all the other stuff we were just speaking about as well, I think playing, at least again from an outsider's perspective, I would say, I mean, there's some definite influence there in terms of bringing it all together, and I think helping amplify some of these charitable causes as well. So I think there's that too. Maybe you could add into that as well. But maybe we could.
And they've done a really good job. If I could speak to one more thing, they've done a really good job with 716 Day, July 16th. The past couple of years, they've done this fundraising effort, really like leveraging how much people in Buffalo and people connected to Buffalo love to give and support Buffalo. think they've done an amazing job with their Give 716 Day. And you can pick a different charity that you want to support for that day, and then they have incentives like T-shirts and different things that, forever how much you donate to these different causes. I mean, if that's not understanding, then I don't know what is. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, I do want to sort of shift into another segment here, and we've kind of been, exchanging stories a little bit, but maybe you've got one more for us for this water cooler story segment. And usually here, I just ask guests to indulge listeners with a story relating to the talk or to their profession. And I'd love to hear what you've got for us today, Dale.
yeah, so I'm 46. All right. So when the Bills were going to the Super Bowls in the early 90s, that was my sophomore, junior, senior year of high school, then my freshman year of college. So you have, Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Andre Reid, Bruce Smith. These guys were like,
oh, the greats. Yeah.
They were up there. I mean, they were
Hall of Famers.
Being able to, all Hall of Famers, being able to see these guys, cheer for them, all that stuff. I don't want to say they were like gods, because that's the wrong word to use, but they were on a pedestal, right? So these guys were Thurman Thomas, league MVP. I think it was the 92 season, 91 season, 92 season, all those things. And so fast forward now. Okay. So I grew up watching these guys, kind of idolizing these athletes. And a couple years into the 26 shirts effort, which grew out of Bills Mafia. A couple years after Bills Mafia started, 1 year service project was going to be just that, and it just turned into, my vocation now. But I had the opportunity, reached out to Thurman Thomas. Hey, there's this guy that we're going to be helping. He's got brain cancer. Huge fan of yours. We would love to do a shirt about you to support him. Yeah. Thurman says, yeah, I'm in. And I said, hey, okay, one more ask, Thurman. Thank you for signing off on it. Would you mind modeling the shirt for us? And one of those like say no more things, yeah, come on. Here's my address. Here's where I live. Come on out. We'll do a photo shoot. And so you have this guy, now this is back, that was like in 2015 or 16 or something like that. I remember. Yeah. But maybe it was 2014. Holy cow. It was I don't know. All the years blend together. I'm old. But so I grew up idolizing this guy, and now I'm on his back deck looking at him through a viewfinder on a camera, taking a picture of him in a shirt. It was just, wild. It was insane. It was crazy, and just like one of those things, is this even happening? Normally, if you put yourself in that situation, you assume, okay, and now I'm going to get arrested because I'm on this guy's I snuck, scenario I could think of was like, if I snuck in, it was, it's crazy. Right, but he invited us in. We, like I said, we took photos and everything. Super gracious. He promoted it the whole time. It was awesome. We hung out for a little bit afterwards. We were chatting with his wife, Patty, who's an absolute sweetheart. Just that's my story. I probably got a couple others. One that's my knee jerk reaction when somebody asks me what's the one story? What's the one thing that's happened that you kind of blows your mind? That blows my mind. Go to Thurman Thomas's house and do a photo shoot with him.
Not? Like you said, I mean, these players were almost like a godlike status within the community back in the day, and during those formative years, growing up, being younger, watching that team play. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, he was one of my favorites as well growing up. So. I can only imagine what that must have felt like. And I think too, maybe this speaks to something else as well, that this whole thing, this whole Bills Mafia, and what you've been doing with 26 shirts as well. People within the community certainly are aware of it, and it doesn't extend to just Bill and Joe on the street. This is extending out to the organization. They know players, current players, former players. You yourself have become a bit of a known item as well in that sense. I'm sure a lot of these people are aware of your efforts, and that's why maybe even Thurman Thomas himself was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to do this. There's legitimacy to what you're doing, and it kind of speaks to it in that sense too. I'm guessing, at least. Yeah.
So weird. I'll be honest with you, it's so right? Weird. I'm just
gratifying also in the same sense. If you are able to kind of zoom out a little bit here and kind of take this macro look at it all. I mean, there is some recognition going on there, Del, I think.
It's all I can say is it's so weird. I grew up a Bills fan, like everybody else in Western New York. I love them no more, no less than other Bills fans. Even you'd say the term super fan at the outset there. I'm not really crazy about that term because Bills Mafia, we're all super fans. Some of us dress up. True. Okay. Some of us dress up like Poncho did, or other different characters among the fan base, Elvis and stuff. But a lot of us don't. But just because somebody dresses up like Elvis or Pancho did, or
Right.
whomever, like the chefs and stuff. Like they're not a bigger fan than
No.
the person sitting next to him just because they got an outfit. Like I'm not belittling them at all. I'm just saying
Yeah.
like that fandom is all the same. So just because I came up with a clever hashtag accidentally, and um just it's grown, and I've had the opportunity to do good things with it. I'm not
Yeah.
a bigger fan than anybody else,
Yeah.
So when people say like, "Hey, Del Reid, can I get a picture?" I used to be like really weird about it, be like, I guess so if you want. But now I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Just because like it's not about me. They want a picture with me because they
Right.
love the team and I love
Yeah.
the team,
Yeah.
and just it's just an expression. I mean, it's not even about me. It's not about me. And so once you realize that all this stuff, like none of it's about me, it's about the love for the team. It's about the love
Right.
for the region. You
Yeah.
know, um, it's like I said earlier, it's an honor to play this role that I play in Bills
Yeah.
fandom,
Yeah.
which is
I think
still weird.
Yeah, yeah, and I can see that, and I think I'd like to circle back as well to kind of like what we started this conversation off on, like notions of authenticity and sincerity. And I think in what you do at 26 Shirts and how you carry yourself and some of your thoughts and feelings, and I think people pick up on that, and it shows. That's what I'm trying to get at here, I suppose. We do have one last segment here, and I'd like to squeeze that in if we could, and it's something called the crystal ball segment. And here, I'm usually looking at trends, predictions, so on and so forth. But in terms of this evolution of Bills Mafia and what it could be moving forward, when we know what it's done, we've spoken to that already in terms of charitable organizations and some of these drives and whatnot. How do you see it manifesting itself moving forward? Do you think there's different avenues that they can go down, or I don't know? What do you see going down in the next few years?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and I feel like what do you see happening um, in the future? I feel like it's kind of happening. Like I mentioned before, the 716 Giving Day,
Yeah,
the PSE, Google Sports Entertainment. I believe that's who I should be crediting. Because I think it was just the Bills because the Sabres are involved as well. So I'll credit PSE. I think it's great. I love that they have taken the notion of Bills fans loving on their community financially in ways that support the community tangibly. I love that they've taken that to the next level, and they've basically said like, listen, you don't have to just support Oshai. You don't have to just support you know, the Poncho Packs effort for Teacher's Desk, just because that's what whomever started it was passionate about at that time. Like
right.
support who you want, how you want, or however much you want, and we'll support you in it. I think that's fantastic. Just the idea of, again, just the community. The Bills represent the community, and like you said, some people may belittle that, how much we get invested in what happens on the field and how much we love the team. But like, really, the team is in a lot of ways an avatar just for our love for
Yeah,
Western New York. And I'm really happy that it's gone this way, because you look at other fan bases. I'm not going to name specific ones, but they're known for things that are, they're not known for doing good. They're not known
yeah,
for what I hope that we as Bills fans kind of set the example for every fan base, for every sport. I would love for that to be something where, like, if you're a you know uh Tampa Bay Rays fan, that you want to support your love for the team through
yeah,
charitable giving in Tampa or something like
yeah,
that. I try to think of the most obscure random team I could that is unrelated to the Bills as possible.
yeah.
But like, I just that's something I'm so proud of, because
Yeah, marrying these
you
two
know
sort of ideals together, these two passions, sport, and then also sort of giving and thinking of others in
mhm.
some way, bringing them together in a way that has impact or can create impact.
Because yeah, I mean, I've never been rich. I've never owned lots of things, but I the stuff that I've owned in my life, the stuff that I've whenever my bank account has been healthier than at other times, like that's nice, but like that's not fulfillment. Like
Yeah,
having a bunch of stuff isn't fulfillment. Helping somebody in a terrible situation, that's fulfillment, at least for me. And
yeah,
I'm not here to speak for everybody else, but it seems like a lot of people seem to agree with me in terms of how they've expressed their love for the team through their charitable giving, because that's what it is. It's all about. I can't imagine. Like,
yeah.
I just thought of this now. Like, if I don't want to jinx it. If the Bills were to win the Super Bowl, I can't imagine like the giving opportunities that might even happen. Like, you know what? The Bills just won the freaking Super Bowl.
Yeah,
We're all giving with a Super Bowl 40, 57, 57.
yeah.
We're all giving $57 to XYZ. You know what I mean?
There it
Or give
is.
$57 to whatever charity you want.
Yeah,
And let's, you know what I mean? It's just, that's the
Yeah.
kind of that's the reaction that gets elicited from Bills fans. So I'm
Yeah.
totally spouting off now. I apologize. I'm probably eating
No,
up all
no,
the
no. I
time
think
that
that's
I'm
great. I
giving
think
it.
it symbolizes much of the talk that we've had today is, like
Mhm.
what you just said. If they ever did win that Super Bowl, and hopefully they do, knock on wood here, what you just said, I couldn't imagine the giving possibilities. And I think that's kind of, it sums up, you 26 shirts, a lot of your endeavors is that sentiment right there. So maybe with
Right.
that in mind, that's a good point to sign off on all of this. But yeah, I can't thank you enough, Del. I mean, it's been a true pleasure to have you on the show, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. And real quick, because I alluded to it earlier, I said the words of
Sure.
wisdom part, so I don't want to miss it. I just want to say at the outset, like, follow your passion in terms of for entrepreneurs. Follow your passion, and the money will follow. If you follow
Yeah.
the money, you risk a very non-passionate life. So that's just I wanted to say
Yeah. No, thanks for throwing that in there. Yeah.
that.
Well, if you like today's show, please be sure to share. Let other people know about what's going on here. And we're having great guests on, just like we had today with Dell. You can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcast. We do have a YouTube channel as well that you can go on over there and watch videos, much like the conversation we had today. We will have some video or some image overlays as well that will accompany the talk. And of course, too, you can find out about Dell and what he's doing at 26 Shirts. He's on Twitter. All the information links will be included in the show notes. And then finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as a, where we'll continue to explore and unearth the details of professions and the people behind them. Until next time, I'm your host, Christopher Schoenwald. Stay curious about life and living.